welcome you into the Cross Country Mortgage Campus here in Berea, Ohio. Welcome to Draft Week 2023. I'm Jason Gibbs. Coming up on this week's edition of the best podcast available, special pre-draft edition, the one and only Dane Brugler from The Athletic. Get his draft guide now, the 309-page The Beast, by subscribing to The Athletic. Dane Brugler, draft extraordinaire and draft guru, will join us coming up in just a couple minutes. The NFL draft this year, once again, the Cleveland Browns will not have a first-round pick for the second consecutive year, thanks in part to the Deshaun Watson trade. We will not have a second-round pick either, compliments of our trade with the New York Football Jets to grab wide receiver Elijah Moore. Our first pick comes in the third round at pick number 74 late on Friday night. We'll have two third-round picks at 74 and pick number 98. We'll have two fourth-round picks, two fifth-round picks, a sixth-rounder, and a seventh-rounder. 8 total picks in all. We'll see if by Saturday afternoon that is still the case. But as of today, Wednesday, the day before the NFL draft, we do have 8 draft picks. And it will be interesting to see how things unfold, especially as we get into day 2 and day 3. We'll have more for you on our draft coverage coming up in just a few minutes. Right now, let's get right down to it, though. Dane Brugler, he is the draft guru, right up there in terms of the best who covered the NFL draft. I had a chance to sit down and talk with him about the top positions in this draft, about the guys that could be available on day 2 and day 3. We talk a little Buckeyes because everybody wants to know where those Ohio State players are going to go. All that and more, a comprehensive look at the 2023 NFL Draft with Dane Brugler. Have a watch and have a listen. Here on the best podcast available, happy to be joined now by the great NFL draft analyst, our resident draft analyst, Dane Brugler from The Athletic. You can get his draft guide, 308 pages, kids. Trust me, I printed it out, multiple copies. Everybody in the building loves me right now. 308 pages. You can get it with your subscription to The Athletic. Dane Brugler, appreciate a few minutes of your time on this crazy, crazy draft week. Maybe not so crazy for the Browns, especially on Thursday night, but come Friday and then into Saturday, a lot of opportunities for the Browns to improve that roster a little bit.
Yeah, no quite. I mean, Browns fans, they're NFL fans. And so this is a big week for the NFL. A lot of teams are going to get better. And, it'll start in the first round, but there'll be some starters on day 2 coming out of this draft. And with the Browns having multiple third-round picks, I think they could be encouraged about maybe some of the options that'll be there for them at that point. This is going to be, there's craziness at the top. We still don't know how the quarterback situation is going to play out the top 10. I think we're going to see a lot of interesting picks towards the end of the first round, maybe some big surprises. Remember last year with Cole Strange to the Patriots, and that no one saw that coming. We could have a few more of those this year because I think the grades between picks 20 and 60 they're pretty similar, and I think a lot of teams fans need to remember team draft boards, they're not like this. My draft guide's got everyone included because I want to make sure everyone's in there, but most team draft boards are 120 names, 130 names, maybe some of them fewer, some of them more, but it's not a lot of names. And so towards the end of the first round, we could definitely see some surprises. It'll be interesting to see how it all plays out.
Talking with Dane Brugler. You can follow him on Twitter at DP Brugler. Let's talk about that day 2. You and I had talked about it off air. I've heard you talk about it, and I've heard it at the NFL Combine. After day 2, kind of a fall off. So the Browns, they have the assets to move back up if they want to get some additional picks on day 2. But day 2 seems to be that day that if you're going to get some guys, day 2 is the day to do that.
Yeah, I think somewhere in that 4th round, I think is where it's going to be. We see a little bit of a drop off. And so I think those early 4th round picks are going to be pretty valuable. And the Browns have one of those. So it'll be interesting to see what they're okay parting with. And if they did, make a move up, And but maybe when they're sitting there in the 70s, maybe the guys they have their eye on, maybe they're wiped out, and so maybe you move back even a few spots and you pick up a future draft pick for next year. And it's just it's tough because you don't know how those first 70 picks are going to play out. You let the board fall to you. I'm sure there will be a few times where they'll be making some calls and, well, hey, this guy is, if he gets past 60, we're going to take a hard look at, okay, what's it going to cost for us to move up here 10 spots? Or there will be a few of those. I promise you that. Now, if they actually do it, we'll have to see. But I think certain positions are stronger than others, especially edge rushers. Defensive tackle is interesting because so many teams need those defensive tackles. So even some of my guys that I've ranked as third round type of players, I wouldn't be surprised if they end up in the second. Guy like Jervon Dexter from Florida or Zach Pickens, South Carolina, guys that this team I think could have on their radar. They could go in that late second round or before the Browns pick because a lot of teams are looking for those big men in the middle, really bolster that defensive line depth, like we know the Browns are looking to do. So it gets really interesting at that point in the draft.
The other big note as you look at this draft class in its entirety, it's an older class. Like there's a lot of guys that, due to the COVID era and stayed in school maybe a year or two longer, and you're getting guys that aren't necessarily 20, 21 years old. They're a few years older, and that makes a big difference.
Yeah, and you factor in NIL as well, where a lot of guys are okay staying in college another year because they're getting paid like professionals. And so it usually, this is the lowest number of underclassmen we've had come out in the last 5-7 years, because a lot of underclassmen had options. And you know what? The chance to stay in school, make money, get better, and not have to become a professional right away to support my family, I'll take advantage of that. And so several underclassmen did. And it does have a ripple effect about, the pool of draft prospects here. And so, we know the Browns are typically an organization that pays attention to age, especially in the top 100 picks. I think once you get on day 3, you're willing to compromise a little bit. But you want younger players, especially at those premium position. And we'll have to see how they juggle that, because it's not always ideal. And in a draft like this, when you're not picking until the early third round, maybe you have to compromise a little bit on certain things with prospects, and age might be one of them.
All right, if you take a look at this draft class again in its entirety, what's the deepest position on defense? What's the deepest position on offense?
Offense, I'd probably go running back. It's Bijan at the top. He's going to go early, and he should go early. I think the moment Bijan Robinson's drafted, he'll be a top 10 running back in the NFL. I don't say that lightly. I think he's that good of a player. And soon after that, we'll see Jahmyr Gibbs. And then really on day 2, that's where I think a lot of the value at the position is going to come. I think we'll see a run on these guys in the 3rd round. But even in the 4th round, 5th round, I think you're going to feel good about some of the options that are left for you. So running back, really loaded position this year. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention tight end as well. This is one of the stronger tight end classes we've seen the last decade. We could have as many as 3-4 guys go in the 1st round. I think the over-under right now is maybe 2.5. And so, traditionally we see tight end teams waiting until day 2 to take their tight end. But this year it's different because these guys are so talented. Michael Mayer, Dalton Kincaid, Luke Musgrave, Darnell Washington. I'm a big fan of Tucker Kraft out of South Dakota State. South Dakota State, all they do is produce tight ends. How about the great Steve Hayden back in the day?
Yes.
Since 1976, South Dakota State has only had 3 top 100 picks. 2 top 100 picks. Tucker Kraft would be the 3rd. The first 2, Steve Hayden and Dallas Goedert, still playing with the Eagles. So it's tight end, a little bit of a tight end U from FCS. But tight end's a really loaded position. Sam Laporta and Luke Schoonmaker out of Michigan. And it really stretches until day 3. So on offense, running back, tight end. On defense, edge rusher and corner. Corners, we're going to see a lot of those guys drafted in every round. 1st round, Devin Witherspoon, Christian Gonzalez, those guys will go early. We'll see maybe 5 corners go in the first round, but it's not going to slow down. Second round, third round, fourth round, we'll see plenty of corners drafted. And there's a little bit of a blurred line there with some nickels, and I think more so than ever, the lines are blurred with that position. And then also edge rushers. Will Anderson, Tyree Wilson, both those guys are in the mix to go number 2 in this draft. But then it's going to stretch. We're going to see plenty of edge rushers off the board, rounds 2, rounds 3, rounds 4. Once you get into that third, fourth, fifth round range, you're looking at sub package guys, or guys you just want to add to the rotation. But we think that's probably what the Browns are going to be looking for at this point. Where they're picking, you add another guy to the rotation, some fresh legs. We know they drafted the position last year with Alex Wright, then Isaiah Thomas. Keep adding to it. Keep adding. Guys that you can work in there and help put pressure on the pocket.
This wide receiver class, back to the offensive side of the ball. A couple guys on day one, obviously, but not the buzz that maybe we've had in years past at that position. Is that one of those positions that after day 2, it kind of drops off pretty dramatically, or can you still find value on that day 3?
You can always find value, I think, because there's so many of these guys that someone's bound to fall through the cracks, right? If a Jaden Reed at a Michigan State, if he were to fall to day 3, love the value at that point. He's not the biggest guy at 5'11", right around 190 pounds, but he has speed and he plays much bigger than that. He has outstanding ball skills. Plays well through contact, and that's why I gave him a 3rd round grade. I think he's a top 100 pick. But if he were to fall to the 4th round, love the value at that point. Trey Palmer in Nebraska, 6'2", 220 pounds. Or no, excuse me. He's smaller than that. He's 6 foot, 190 pounds. He has that take a top off a defense type of speed. He's that vertical stretch guy that defenses have to respect. And you could probably get him in the 4th round as well. So if you're looking for more of a possession threat, Xavier Hutchinson from Iowa State, he's also in that mix, 6'2", 205. He's one of the most productive pass catchers ever in the Big 12. And then I think every round you can find a guy that you like at that point in the draft. So the wide receiver is interesting for the Browns because you look at the depth chart and there's a lot of names. There's a lot of bodies at wide receiver right now for the Browns. But there's some question marks about, okay, who's playing which role, what's, and obviously we know that the team like the Browns, especially Andrew Berry, he's got a 2024 roster, and he's paying attention to that. Okay, who's going to be our wide receivers on that 224 roster? And is it somewhere we have to look at in this draft, potentially add to what the future is going to hold?
Talking with the great Dane Brugler from The Athletic. Get his draft guide now, The Beast, 308 pages with your subscription to The Athletic. The Athletic puts out some great content. We love it here in Berea at the Cross Country Mortgage Campus. Would encourage you to do the same and get a copy of The Beast before the draft actually begins, so you know who these guys are on day 2 and day 3. All right, if I take a look at some of these other guys, some players that stand out to me. I'm a Bowling Green guy. I'm a Bowling Green homer. I want to talk about Karl Brooks. Selfish? Probably. But where is this guy? He's getting a lot of buzz. He's kind of moving up the draft board. Somehow didn't get invited to the combine, which is beyond me. But here's a guy that, where does he fit in here in this draft?
Somewhere once you get to day 3, I think I wouldn't be surprised if he's the first pick on day 3, or he goes in the 5th round. I think somewhere in that early day 3 range, 4th, 5th round is where Brooks is probably going to go. And he's used to wearing that orange and brown, so it'd be a natural fit for him. 6'3.5", almost 300 pounds, play as mostly an edge rusher for Bowling Green. But he's with that body type and his quickness, you want him on the interior. You want him as more of a 3 technique, play him over the B gap. He gives you that inside outside versatility. A guy that you can mix and match your defensive front with based off of what you want to do. You think about new defensive coordinator here, what they might want to do on the defensive line. I think he would fit with kind of Cleveland's vision for how they want to build this defensive line, the type of versatility they want, and the price tag. If you don't have to draft Karl Brooks until that early day 3 range, that's the type of target you want to go for. So he had a great Senior Bowl. Like you said, not invited to the combine, but the pro day workout was, I was told, very good. Not just the testing numbers, which were good, but also his position stuff. And that's what you want to see. And so the Browns will not be the only team looking at Karl Brooks once you get to day 3.
All right. And then in your 7th-round mock, a guy that stood out, a guy not on the radar, 7th rounder, left tackle. And it's a position for us where you take a look and, we've got 3 tackles in the building right now, but you need to build up a little bit of depth. We've got some good depth inside at the guard and at the center spot, but Jake Witt, a guy from Northern Michigan University you have on your list, but it's a guy that he's had a couple pro visits here leading up to this draft.
Oh yeah, and it's hard to find sleepers anymore. The term sleeper gets way overused, right? We know who these guys are. I did not know who Jake Witt was until about mid-March when I was kind of tipped off about, hey, this guy at the Central Michigan Pro Day, he had a pretty good workout, and he's from Northern Michigan. He's actually a basketball player at Michigan Tech. Then he decided he did play football in high school, just 2 years. But he was mostly a basketball guy. That was his focus. He decided to he was just a regular student after he left basketball. And then he decided to join the football team. Was never an offensive lineman. He was always a tight end. And then midway through the 2021 season, or towards the end of the 2021 season, they had so many injuries on the offensive line. They came to him with an offensive line jersey at halftime against Ferris State and said, "We need you at tackle." And he had literally zero experience there. Never practiced it, little league, anything. And so he got a few, 5 minutes of practice reps in, went out there, and that's all she wrote. The last, 13 games or so, he's been playing at left tackle. And so this is a very young player, 6'7", 302 pounds, outstanding athlete, ran a 4.89 40-yard dash, 37-inch vertical, unbelievable for a guy that size. A lot to like about Jake Witt as a developmental player. I gave him to the Browns because I know the Browns have shown some interest in him. Almost every team has. He's been on 6:30 visits, some private workouts. I tweeted about all those, but I gave him to the Browns in the early 7th round. Does he even make it that far? There's a lot of buzz on Jake Witt and the type of development that you could have with him. So not a plug and play guy by any means, but someone that you bring into your with your coaching staff and you bring them along, and you might have a gem that you could find in later rounds.
All right, big picture, 1st round here as we talk with Dane Brugler from The Athletic and our resident draft guru. Bryce Young, number 1. In your 7th-round mock, you think it still holds true here as we count down to Kansas City in night 1?
I do. I think as we get closer, I think we become more confident that's where the Panthers are going to go. And, it's really, you have to be okay with the size, and that's it. As long as you're okay with the size, I think you feel great about everything else. It's with all quarterbacks, you're sacrificing something, right? There's no such thing as a perfect quarterback. With some quarterbacks, you're sacrificing mobility, or some you're sacrificing, maybe he's not the pinpoint accurate guy. Hopefully he comes along. With Bryce Young, you're obviously sacrificing size. He'll be the smallest quarterback in the NFL the moment he's drafted. You have to be okay with that. And if you are, you're going to love everything else, the vision, the processing, the accuracy. He really does play the position like a point guard, the ability to create space for himself, anticipate passing windows, and really push the ball downfield. The intangibles are off the charts. So if I have to bet on any one of these quarterbacks, it's going to be Bryce Young. And I kind of cross my fingers that he's going to stay healthy. It's not a question of, can he see over the line? And it's less about height as it is build. And can he stay durable? Can he stay healthy? 17-game schedule into the playoffs. That's the bigger question with Bryce Young. And some teams will come to the conclusion that we're not willing to bet on an outlier in the top 5. I totally get it. I totally understand. But for those that are saying he's worth the risk, I understand that as well. And I think that's where the Panthers are at with their decision-making process.
Houston wouldn't take a non-QB at number 2, would they?
I think there's a better chance they do than they take a quarterback. And I think it's easy for us on the outside looking in to say they need a quarterback. But we have to remember this is a first-year coaching staff. They're not feeling rushed to push the envelope to take a quarterback if they're not 100% all in. And we have to remember they still have next year's multiple first round picks next year, which I know Browns fans know about. So they don't feel like they have to do this if they're not in love. They like these quarterbacks, great. But if they don't love them, then you know what? Let's build a defense with a Tyree Wilson out of Texas Tech or a Will Anderson out of Alabama. D'Amico Ryans, exactly. You think about that San Francisco defense, and that was as much of their success as anything. Kyle Shanahan, as much praise as he gets and deserves, that defense is a big part of what the 49ers have been the last few years. And it's obviously you're not going to compare these guys to Nick Bosa, but a cornerstone defensive prospect that you can draft and build around. I can understand if the Texans come to the conclusion that is the right way to go with the second overall pick this year.
Dane Brugler, appreciate all of your time. We'll break it all down after the draft, but obviously you can catch Dane on a number of our platforms, youtube.com/Browns, clevelandbrowns.com. He'll be on CBD this week, Friday, to recap round one and look ahead to night number 2 in the draft. And, of course, the week after when everything gets settled and we figure out who we have and where we go from there. Mr. Brugler, rest that voice. Appreciate the time, and we will talk soon, my friend. You can catch all of Dane's stuff on theathletic.com. Subscribe today. Get a copy of The Beast. Dane Brugler, appreciate the time, sir.
No, thank you. Can't wait.
Again, special thanks to Dane Brugler. Make sure you subscribe today to The Athletic. Get the draft guide. You will need The Beast on Friday and on Saturday. There is no better guide in terms of knowing who the Browns have picked, the backgrounds on those players, and what to expect from those players and those new Cleveland Browns players than The Beast and the draft guide that Dane Brugler puts out year in and year out. Dane will be appearing as well on numerous platforms here throughout the rest of the week and next week, breaking down all of our draft picks, clevelandbrowns.com, youtube.com/Browns. It's also where you can find all of our latest editions of the best podcast available, including my interview with Ryan Wilson, CBS Sports NFL draft guru, Glenn Cook, assistant GM of your Cleveland Browns. All that and more to get you ready for draft weekend 2023. Now, from a radio network standpoint, all along the University Hospital's Cleveland Browns radio network, our coverage will start Thursday night at 8 p.m. No draft pick on Thursday, no matter. Ken Carman, Nathan Zagura, Gerard Cherry will have complete coverage of round 1 of the draft. We'll have interviews with our players, front office, and coaches as well throughout the evening from 8 p.m. to midnight. On Friday night, things get down to business here. Round 2 and round 3 coverage starts at 7 o'clock. Again, Ken Carman, Nathan Zagura, and former Buckeye great and current Browns analyst Tyvis Powell will join us on the broadcast. The voice of the Browns, Jim Donovan, will be here. Players, the draft picks. The moment they get picked, they meet with the media, then they meet with us, and we introduce you to them. We'll have front office and coaching reaction as well later on Friday night. Saturday, we get going at 12 o'clock. Nathan Zagura and 3-time Super Bowl champ and Browns sideline analyst Gerard Cherry from noon to 4. The picks from the third round should be here at the Cross Country Mortgage Campus. We'll have them live in studio with us. Reaction, plus a busy, busy day. Again, 2 4th-rounders, 2 5th-rounders, a 6th and a 7th. That could always change, but that is the game plan as of right now. We'll have comprehensive coverage of the picks as they come in. We'll have the draft picks on with us as well. That's all along the University Hospital's Cleveland Browns radio network. Thanks to Drew Davidson for all of his hard work week in and week out. Yellowstone, crushing it and doing it well every week. Shakes his head no. I say yes, because this wouldn't look as good as it does without the great Yellowstone. Thanks to Dane Brugler from The Athletic for all of his hard work. Thank you for watching. Thanks for listening. We are back with you next week to break down the Browns draft class. I'm Jason Gibbs. This is the best podcast available.